Welcome everyone to the Mind, Body, and Soul television show coming to you live for Denver, Colorado Internet Studios. We are also streaming live on YouTube Live as well as Google Hangouts and at ConsciousEvolutionMedia.com. I'm your host, Coach Steve Toth, and also the founder of Conscious Evolution Media for a little over 10 years now. And we are having tremendous success and fun doing these shows. And this evening will be no different. We have a very incredible and someone that's going to generate, I think, a lot of curiosity, because he certainly has for me. His name is David Christopher, and he's an award-winning author, and I'm sure many other things that we're going to find out about in just a minute. So welcome to the show, David.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, it's great to have you. And if I took away the title award-winning author and any other title that anybody has ever asked or addressed you by, that could be, a friend, a colleague, maybe a brother, a father, who knows? All those titles that exist in our everyday lives. If I take all those away, what's left? Who is David Christopher?
Let me see what the silence brings. I am someone who wants to somehow reconcile our spiritual nature with our physical nature. One of the things that I've heard many times on my spiritual journey is that we are spiritual beings in a human form. And to me, that something else is also true, and this struck me as I was going through this process, is that we are also physical beings on a human journey. And a friend of mine named David Korten, who's a publisher of Yes Magazine out of Bainbridge Island in Washington, he said he was running into this idea that there was a lot, or this, I don't know if problem is it, but this situation where people were so focused on their spirituality they forgot they were on a planet. They forgot that we were human beings being on a physical plane as well as a spiritual plane. And so it helped me understand what was going on with my own process, that spirituality is very important to me, that spirituality to me being that connection with that which created you. And there's a physical dimension to that, and the scientific dimension to that, almost a materialistic scientific dimension to that, although I don't know if I really want to use that word, but materialism.
Too late, you used it already.
Yeah, too late. So,
can't take it back.
I can recant if I want.
It's in the ether already, David. So this is pretty fascinating stuff. I'm just curious as to what inspired you to write this book. Like, what happened in your life?
I wanted to understand the science. I wanted the scientific story of our creation, the new science, not the old mechanistic science. Mm-hmm. Not the old story of the big dumb rock spinning off into a meaningless universe. Mm-hmm. I had left the church that I grew up in, which was the Episcopal Church, when I was a teenager. And as with many people, I just kind of bumped along and really had no larger story other than there's this vague notion of a higher being or a deity or what have you. And I really, when I ran into a man named Brian Swim and a woman named Sister Miriam McGillis, who were talking about the new cosmology coming out of the latest science, that it was beginning to agree with what we've been telling ourselves all along, that we are part of an amazing, mysterious, creative, and intelligent universe. And I loved that story. But I wanted it told in the way in which it was told to me, in the same form, well, I don't know, in the same manner, in the same poetry using the same. I miss the lyricism of the liturgy. I miss the cadence and the sound of the scriptures. And I wanted that academic science, that analytical science. I wanted that told in a poetic way. I wanted it told in a metaphorical way. And so, I took kind of the audacious step of just taking that and writing my own Genesis story, really.
Mm-hmm.
And
I see.
using poetry and metaphor to teach this story. So what came through me is this dialogue between a seeker and a sage, and within the story of those two beings, as they go through, they're here on Earth. They meet at coffee shops. They meet at the ocean. They meet in the mountains, and they go through their dialogue. And from that dialogue, the sage starts with the biggest story of all, 13.8 billion years ago, and tells the story of creation all the way through the creation of the galaxies, stars, planets, life, and the emergence of humanity on Earth, all the way to our present-day catastrophes that we've created for ourselves. And then, what do we do with that story? What does that story have to teach us in regards to how we're going to face these challenges, the spiritual challenge that we face globally, the social justice challenges, the ecological challenges that we face? So, that is what spurred me on to write this book, is I want to understand all of these challenges from that framework. And that's what came through me. That's what essentially Spirit and I got together and put together in this book.
So obviously you've done a lot of research to be able to write this, right?
I've done a lot of research, and the more I did, the more I felt I didn't know. There always seemed to be one more book to read or one more person to talk to.
Yeah, what's interesting...
I had that you become... Well, and you probably have felt this too, as you learn more and more, you learn more and more of what you don't know, which I think is healthy. I mean, you need a sense of humility. I'm not nearly as adamant about the universe is this way as I used to be. There's a sense of tentativeness and acceptance of the fact that it fundamentally is a mystery, and it's something to be experienced rather than something to be figured out.
Yeah, well, I'm always after asking the question that I don't know how to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Because all other questions have been already asked.
Uh-huh.
And answered, for that matter.
Yes, yeah.
But you see, what's also interesting is that a lot of times I've been accused of not reading the author's books that I'm interviewing. And what's interesting about that is that I'm finding that I don't have to, because the people and the authors especially, but everybody that's attracted to this network, this is basically all based on the laws of attraction. And everybody that comes here and has a dialogue with us and with the viewers, it turns out that what they speak is the truth. And how do I know that is the truth? Because thousands of people have come through these doors, and the messages are the same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you can write, any book that you want. If you approach it from a place you're approaching it from, and all the others that have approached it from, you're not going to be able to write a book that's completely new.
Mm-hmm. No. I mean, what the offerings are is a different perspective or framework, but the underlying fundamentals, they don't change. I mean, I think we do discover more and more about ourselves.
Oh, absolutely.
And more about the universe, and we are constantly learning. But that fundamental idea of the mystery, I don't know that will ever change. And what I really enjoyed coming to in the writing of this book was seeing the science begin to sell the same story that we've known all along. A lot of the mystics of the ages, and even indigenous, what the sage in this book calls ancient mind. That science is beginning to realize that we all come from the same source. We are all one. We all belong here. And the old stories, the old religious stories, and some of the old scientific stories had a story of fallen, that humanity is fallen or humanity is flawed. And that's not the case. We belong here. We are no less important than any other phenomenon in the universe, but we are no more we belong. We are no more or less. We belong here. We're not.
Well, if we didn't, we wouldn't be here, David.
Right, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here. And yet that is so permeated in our culture, and it's hard to be in our culture and not have that absorbed somehow in our bodies, that we feel that, taking on that old story. And part of, I think, the spiritual challenge really is about reconciling that story, reconciling those old embodied wounds that we were given as we grew up and as the culture inculcated us with these ideas and these stories.
Yeah. So I'm curious about, you talk about this on your website, that all the crises that we're experiencing right now is that it's actually possibly the best thing that could happen to us. Mm-hmm. So go deeper with that notion, if you would, please.
That, we're facing enormous crises. We're facing a spiritual crisis, a crisis of meaning. What are we for? Our culture, especially in the West, tells us our jobs are to have jobs and to buy stuff and consume. The social justice crises, the great inequities of how wealth is distributed amongst us, and the ecological crises, of which catastrophic climate change is just one aspect of it. We're also going through the sixth mass extinction, which far eclipses whatever, it is sort of the embodiment of all the ecological crises, that if we do not change course, we are going to lose half the species on the planet within a generation. It's already started. If you talk with natural scientists, they are in almost unanimous agreement that we're in the sixth mass extinction. And yet that's not out there. But we can't help but feel that there's something very devastating happening on the planet.
Yeah, well, everything is breaking down. Everything is breaking down around us.
Yes.
So
getting back and just to answer your question about the best things that ever happened, why these might be the best things that ever happened. Mm-hmm. One of the stories that the sage uses from the original text of the original story is what was called the oxygen catastrophe. About 3 billion years ago, as we as life figured out how to use photosynthesis, the process of photosynthesis, to strip apart water and air to gain another source of energy, we gave off oxygen. And as the book says, a vile and poisonous fire that slowly spread and turned the color of the sky an ominous, deadly blue. The blue of the sky was a catastrophe because oxygen wasn't part of the web of life. It was a foreign thing to happen, and yet and James Lovelock, the scientist who came up with the Gaia hypothesis back in the 70s and 80s, he said that we came that close to losing life on Earth, very, very close, and yet life figured out a way how to use oxygen to gain the cells on Earth figured out how to use oxygen to gain 10 times, 20 times the strength of their ancestors. From that, we were able to create complex cells, and then multicellular beings, and then plants in the water, and animals in the water, which became land plants and land animals, and eventually us. We literally would not be talking tonight unless we had that catastrophe. It's possible that evolution is now using us, or we are using evolution. I don't know what the genesis of it. I mean, cause and effect is getting blurrier and blurrier for me. It's possible that this whole process that we're creating, this catastrophe that we're creating for ourselves, might be what we need to really shock us out of what we're doing on the planet, what modern mind has done to the planet. And it may be that catalyst to this next evolutionary leap in consciousness.
Yeah. Well, do you find it to be true, David, that the bigger the breakdown, the bigger the breakthrough?
Yes, that is the possibility. That's the hope, and there's no guarantees, but that is the possibility.
So the good news is that this is a pretty big breakdown.
Yes.
So I watch a lot of media. I don't know about you, but I watch a lot of media and listen to a lot of media because I'm curious as to what's out there and what is everybody talking about. But The two things I don't do on this network is religion and politics, and I have my reasons why, and I think most people that watch this network understand that no explanation is required. So I'm just curious about the book, because the real title of the book is The Whole Universe, a new story of creation for the heart, soul, and the spirit. And the Holy Universe, that part of the title gives it a religious context.
It does.
And is that...
It can. I mean, there are people who read that into it. And, and that... Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I was just curious, why did you use that title, The Whole Universe? Because people, it's possible that people that are no longer follow religion, and I'm certainly one of those people, not because I don't believe in a higher source or I don't believe in God as people say it. What I don't believe in anymore is what we've done to religion. Yes. And I separated myself from that club because it doesn't work for me anymore.
Yes, and this book is really for people who are spiritual but not religious. And John Robbins, who wrote a book called Diet for a New America and the Food Revolution, he's well known in some ecological circles. He basically said, for those of us who call ourselves spiritual but not religious, Christopher has done a marvelous job in helping us reclaim the word holy. And that's what I wanted to do. That holy has been, the word holy, H-O-L-Y, has been twisted. It has been maligned. It has been misused. And I wanted that back. I wanted that sense of awe and holiness to be part of who I am in my spirituality. I mean, the word holy really comes from the same root as the word whole, W-H-O-L-E, or the word holistic. That's the frame of mind that I want to reclaim, is that we are in a holistic universe. What happens at one end of this 13.8 billion year universe is felt at the other end. It is all connected, and it is all holy, it is all holistic. And that word holy, for me, invokes a sense of respect, of sacredness, of reverence, that I think is both the scientific world and in some circles in spirituality, we've let go of. We've kind of distanced ourselves from it because it's so reminiscent of our experiences within religion.
Well, I personally distance myself, just so that I get to share this with you and the viewers, is that it has represented to me confusion, manipulation, power, fear, and force.
Yeah. Yes.
And anytime I experience those in any combination, or even if just one is present, I distance myself because that's not who I am, and I don't want to be with something that doesn't support me.
Yeah. Yes. And I knew it would be a bit of a risk entitling it that. And I haven't run into too many. I have run into one or two people who were turned off by the look of the book and the that word holy. But once they started reading the book and started seeing that, oh, wait a minute, this is a different kind of thing. This is a story. It's also why I put the quote about spiritual but not religious right on the cover.
Yeah, and you clean it up in the subtitle, because you talk about the heart, soul, and spirit. Which definitely cleans it up. It's just what I was feeling is when I hear the word holy, and this is part of probably my brainwashing, is that I think of the Pope. It's the first thing that comes to my mind, and the second thing is the Catholic Church, obviously.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So I'm sure I'm not alone in that brainwashing.
I must say, though, it is fascinating. One wonders what that group of men who chose the latest pope You wonder how much they're talking amongst themselves, wondering, what is this Pope Francis doing? I mean, he's talking about social justice. He's talking about equity. He's saying it's none of my business about... I would have never expected that out of a Pope.
Yeah, he's completely, that is an interesting question, because he is completely the opposite of what has been.
Yes, yes.
And how did he even get voted in?
I don't know.
If they already knew, they must have known who he was and what he stood for.
Perhaps, or one can always speculate that Spirit had a sense of, it's time to change things a little bit. It's time to reclaim some of what has been broken. Some time to repair, some to reclaim some of what has been abused. So that's my prayer, is that he is part of this global shift that must happen, I believe, if our civilizations, certainly our civilizations, are to survive, possibly even our species, although I think we're a very resilient species. It's possible that we might go through these times, what the sage calls the Great Transformation. We may go through these times and there will be a horrific collapse, but the universe does this. It is a creative universe, which means it's also a destructive universe. You have to have both. And as much as difficult as it is for me to see some of that destruction that we've wrought, it is heartbreaking to talk with women who I had a chance to hear speak, to hear them talk about what's happening in Alberta on their native lands with the tar sands. It is heartbreaking to hear of the Native American women with what they're going through in North Dakota with the fracking and the destruction of their water sources and their sacred sites. And it's hard to get through that, and yet part of me just prays that, well, the universe knows what it's doing. It's been doing it for 13.8 billion years, so it's not that it doesn't know what it's doing. But on the other side,
I'm not concerned about, David, what the universe is doing. I'm concerned about what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. As part of the universe. I mean, we are the universe in the form.
We are part of it. Absolutely, we're part of the universe.
Well, we're not part of it. We are the universe.
We are the universe. Yes.
We are the Go ahead.
I'm sure you heard this, David. Is that there's we have this studio right now broadcasting, but there's only one of us here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that's an interesting concept to take us as deeply as we could possibly take it, maybe another day. But I'm curious as to I'm speaking less and less about the problems that we are having, because discussing the problems is really not fruitful. What's fruitful is to talk about what are the solutions. So your experience of writing this book, what did you come up with in terms of what do we need to do as humanity? Who do we need to be, and what can we do to make progress in our own evolution? Because I feel that a lot of people are stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, certainly. Sometimes I feel stuck, deeply stuck. In fact, if a person is feeling stuck, I'm learning that that's actually a good sign. That means at least you're awake and aware that you're stuck.
Yes, yes.
As painful as that is, and when you're in the dark time, as painful as that is, to know that this is part of the process. I think there is nothing proscriptive that I think you can latch on to. There are many systemic changes we need to make. And Donella Meadows talks about that far more eloquently than I can. And she talks about the 10 levels of change, and the most important and the most difficult and yet the most effective way to create change is to change the paradigm, to change the worldview under which we're operating, collectively and individually. And that's part of what I wanted to do with this book, is to give a framework for how how what that world shift is. We started out about, say, 50 to 100,000 years ago, when Homo sapiens began to get really good at language. We created what the sage calls ancient mind. And the worldview created then was one of connection. We belong to the cosmos. We belong to the web of life. We belong to each other. And that doesn't mean we don't fight one another. We also have this proclivity to create others who are not in our clan. But even with all that, in that strife, we still all had, more or less, a sense of connection, a story of connection that we belong here. About 10,000 years ago, we started writing a new story with the rise of systemic agriculture and really got going with the Industrial Revolution, when modern mind emerged. And it created a story of this paradoxical superiority and inferiority, that humanity is the grandest thing in the cosmos, even though individually you're nothing. It's a very almost a multiple personality disorder kind of worldview. And it really came up with that big dumb rock story that we're on this insignificant speck spinning off into a lifeless cosmos. And then the sage talks about what Pierre Teilhard de Chardin created, which was the idea of planetary mind. And just to read a stanza or two of what the sage offers with the planetary mind, the overarching story that we are now creating for ourselves is this: the creative force of the infinite flows throughout and embraces the universe, whole and complete, ever-changing, ever-creative, and ever-destructive, as the infinite plays and dances, as it seizes catastrophe to create anew, as it yearns for ever greater order, ever greater complexity, ever greater consciousness, and ever greater elegance, as it drives itself toward life. We are thus made in the likeness of the infinite. It has always been thus. We never were separate. So that just gives you a taste of the story of modern mind that the sage talks about. And that really is a critical step that we need to go through. I can give you all kinds of steps of how to create, or one can look for places. I don't want to say I can, because I don't know if I can. But you can look for structures on the 7 steps for taking care of social justice issues, restorative justice, or equity, social equity, ways of cleaning up the planet.
Well, but hang on, those are all things that there's no way to do. So I have a simple one. I'm in these days into clarity and simplicity. Imagine that. So I just wanted to run this by you. How about if I say this? What about a new mindset? Creation of a new mindset that everybody works on coming home to themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is a vital part of it.
And stop, because before, if we don't do that, all the other things that you're talking about,
yeah,
we're never gonna get there.
Yeah, and that is a core part of the work. And in fact, the sage talks about a section in the book, a chapter talks about personal story. What are the stories you're telling yourself? But it also examines the larger stories too. How do those personal stories interact with the larger cultural stories that have that influence on you, that have that influence on the way you are in the world, that put in your mind and your body and your soul these ideas of how you should be on the planet. That personal story, it's important that as you work through coming home to yourself, that you give yourself a sense of forgiveness, a sense of acceptance, that you do carry, we carry a lot of baggage, and it's going to come up. My own teacher and I were talking about this yesterday, that it comes up. It's not like you can just snap your fingers and say, oh, we are all one, and let go of the old story that we are all separate. Because it is pretty deeply embodied in many people. It certainly is in me. And that, in a way, gives me a sense of relief that, I don't have to be perfect all the time. I don't have to be this enlightened being. I'm going to swear again. I am going to cut someone off at some point. and then I come back home to myself and say, do I really want to be this? Is this the way I want to show up in the world?
Well,
So
but
that
hang on, hang on for a second, because I was about to share the second one,
Mhm.
because
Okay.
it's really a sub. The word isn't coming to me, but it's like once we come home, and I'm just sharing this from my own experience. Uh, this is not from a book. This is just something what I had to go through to be who I am today, and I haven't arrived anywhere yet. So, so the next thing, and again, it's very simple. The next thing is once we come home and we know who we are and how powerful we are and how we can create anything,
Mhm.
then the next thing is how about just doing the right thing
Mhm.
every moment of our lives? And I'm learning that I always know what the right thing is because
Mhm.
my intuition tells me. And in the past, when this was not my declaration, when I really didn't know who I was, even then I knew what the right thing was, but I did the opposite.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I don't do that anymore. So so I have a track record with myself that nowadays I still know what the right thing is, and this time I'm doing it.
Mhm. Mhm. You were further down the path than I.
Well, I don't know, if we even need to measure it. It's
Yeah.
just, I'm just sharing the experience that I'm having that this is doable, and I didn't get here overnight either, like what you said. It's like this took me most of my life.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
mean, this is just becoming clearer and clearer. I mean, I've been doing this network for over 10 years, and this is just becoming more and more clear. And I don't know how much clearer it can get. I'm sure it will get even more clear. But that's why I wake up every morning because I want to know what's next.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes, and that is you're right. It's for me, it is that personal in a way, it's the personal story is that coming home to oneself. And then the
So
larger thing
may
is
I share a simple example so that everybody gets it? Here's a simple example. I was listening to the radio this morning on the way downtown, and they were talking about voting. I mean, what else would they be talking about these days? Um, and I basically said to myself, well, it's very interesting. What a dilemma. Who are you going to vote for, and which party? I'm basically saying to myself, from my intuition, that um, I cannot vote for either party because it's broken. The system is broken, and I will not give my power to something that is broken. So I will not vote.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
How does that catch you? I mean, how does that? What do you hear in that?
Hmm. Well, so
I don't have control over the radio station. I consider calling in, but I didn't because it's a waste of my time and energy because they're not going to listen. So, um, how are you going to make a difference in the world? Because you can't control Washington, but I can control me.
yes,
I can control what I'm going to do next.
yes,
So I'm not going to vote.
yes. Well, whether or not one votes, it's interesting because I wonder if the intuition would be different for another person. Like
Oh,
for
I'm
instance,
sure.
me
I'm sure.
voting in the local election here, there's something that's very vital that I really do believe in and think that this feels like the right direction to go. So, so I will vote. So I think the important thing is, as you point out, is not so much whether or not one votes, but whether or not one stops long enough to clear their minds well enough to hear
And,
their intuition.
yeah, and tell the truth.
Hmm. And
And
tell.
then act on their own truth. Yeah,
Hmm.
I respect the fact that you're going to vote completely.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't even get into any kind of argument or talk you out of it, because
Right.
if that's what you are called to do, then that's what you must do, and I respect
And
it.
arguing is it's so 20th century, isn't it, though? Uh, well, oh, there was another thought, too, that came to me.
I mean, let me give you another example. This is from a different way to come to it. So because of the times we're in right now, there's all these negative ads, political ads on television.
Oh, Lord, yes.
And so the question I'm asking is, who made that okay? That was acceptable?
Mm-hmm. That it was okay to have negative ads.
Yeah, and how is it that now it's okay with everybody? Nobody says that that's not okay. And how come there are no consequences for doing something like that? Because it's a very, very nasty thing
Mm-hmm.
to
Yes.
do.
It's very effective, too. I mean, one of the things, and this is actually a theme that runs out through this particular book, is the theme of story. How powerful stories are. That when the facts and story collide, facts get run over every time. Story trumps every time. What I believe, what I have told myself, my worldview and the structure of my worldview is vital to my survival. And so if something comes at that worldview to challenge it, it takes a very strong person to accept, to stop and look at that and say, wait a minute, how is this going to change my worldview? So when you talk about negative ads, it is part of a social structure that is created, that emerges when enough people get together and create a story of modern mind. That there is this almost an entity. I actually have a mind, this brewing in my mind of this might be a good thing to write about. It is this almost an entity that has emerged out of humanity's structures and must have everything. It must consume. It must get energy. It must get fossil fuels. It must get uranium. It must mine the earth. I don't even like saying the earth. I like saying earth and refer to it properly.
So the way I'm reading that, David, is
Mm-hmm.
that if that's what's popular,
Yeah.
then there is nothing wrong, because it's completely congruent with everything breaking down.
Yeah.
It is part of that system that's breaking down, and that's why it's acceptable, because that's the mirror. That's who we really are being right now. That's why it's acceptable.
Perhaps. And yet there's a part of me when as you tell the story, it's like it's painful that lies get propagated. It's painful that we act in ways that are not our higher selves. But as you say, perhaps that's part of the process. Perhaps we need to see just how bad it's got to get before we say, is this really what we want to do? Is this really is this the right thing to do?
Right.
And
Those questions are not being asked, I don't think.
you just asked it, though. I offer encouragement that you did ask it. And I'm asking it, and I bet we're not the only two.
Oh, no. There's a lot of people asking it. The ones that are not asking it, the ones that are creating it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So it's and as those structures, see, that's the thing that gives me hope, is that the structural changes, there are efforts that structures do change, that breakdown or breakthroughs can still occur. I was actually talking with a neighbor of mine, and she and her wife got married legally a couple of years ago, and she said, never, ever, ever, even 15 years ago, would I have ever dreamed that structure has changed. To the point now where in the conservative circles, pushing the notion of same-sex marriage is wrong is becoming a liability. And that to me was astonishing how quickly that changed. So I don't know. We have to remember that, even though there are people, as you were saying, there are people who decide to have those negative ads, who decide to do the wrong thing, who have the power to do those things. They are still people, and
wait, David. And in addition to that they're creating it and running it, we don't put up our hand and say that's not okay.
But we did. We are. There were
How?
there were 400,000 people who showed up at New York a couple of weeks ago to say, enough, enough. We need to do something.
Well, that wasn't obviously big enough because it didn't change a thing.
How do you know?
Because the ads are still on.
Well, okay, if we're talking about negative as ads, yes.
Yeah.
But as far as changing the system, there's someone calling to. That's on your end? There's a
yeah.
dog.
It's a dog that's barking.
Okay.
He wants to be in the show.
We might as well acknowledge it so everyone can say.
Yeah, he wants to be. Unfortunately, I don't have control over the dog barking.
Okay, all right. Or the negative ads.
Or the negative ads.
So, what was it? There was one particular piece that came to me that said, mind your stories. Let's see how much I can recall of it. Mind your stories and nurture those that serve and change those that do not. Easier said than done, yes. For those dark stories, the darker stories of our nature and our collective consciousness have cut deep grooves within our psyches. And it turns so quickly to those dark and shadowy valleys. So be quick to forgive both yourself and your world if change is slow to come. I think I did it justice, but it's really, yes, I mean the climate march didn't necessarily change negative ads, but it's part of the milieu. And it may be that we're focusing too much on one aspect of it. That you can so easily find things that will take you down. That's saying it's wrong, it's bad, it's horrible. And yet there's also so many things that are happening.
Yeah, it's not taking me down. It's not taking me down though. That's not accurate.
I'm sorry.
It's not taking me down. I just acknowledge it. So the story that goes with that, David, is that 10 years ago I became almost like a monk. I distanced myself from the masses, including my friends. I basically closed completely down and went inside of me, and I lived in a 12 by 12 room for several years, creating this network, and I continued living that way for another 8 years, and I only came out of that modality 2 years ago, and now what I'm working with is beautiful contrast, because I found that the 8 years I made my life so beautiful, there was nothing wrong because you know, I enjoyed everything that I was doing, but I was by myself, and I wasn't watching television. I wasn't witnessing what's going on out in the world. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, that makes.
And then I said, after 8 years, I said, well, this is interesting. I created a bubble, and I'm living in the bubble, and that no longer felt good to me. I said, I have to go back out into the world and see how much of the stuff that I learned for myself I can use to live in this world, in this real world.
Yes, and that's vital. Actually, it's interesting that you say that, because it reflects what David Korten, whom I mentioned earlier, he talks about what he's calling integral spirituality. That when one awakens, it's then time to engage. That it's not simply about my personal spiritual development. The question then becomes, that's my work, you know, coming home to myself. And then, you know, I actually really like your structure, then doing what's right. How do I use what I've learned and then continue to learn to help create a world that is doing the right thing, whether it's ecological work or social justice work, which really is more or less the same thing.
Yeah. Well, whatever it is.
How do I bring, what you're doing now is bringing voices out that might not otherwise have been heard. You're helping to contribute to this planet shift into, you know, what the sage calls planetary mind, or what Joanna Macy calls the Great Turning, or what other people have named different. They're all, it's like the many names of God. It's the many names for these times. They're all pointing to the same thing, of an awakening of a collective spirituality as well as an individual spirituality. So it's interesting how your life has paralleled that, and it's very hopeful too, actually.
Yes, it is, because now I am not just in a bubble, and I was engaging with thousands of people, probably hundreds of thousands of people throughout these last 10 years on the network, but I wasn't doing it out in the real world, as you might say. But for some reason, 2 years ago, I was ready. I was like being poked that now you got to take this out to the real world and see if you can make your life work in there.
Yes. Yeah. Which it's one thing to be. I can't remember one of my. I don't know if it was a friend or a quote. I said, it's very easy to be spiritual at the monastery.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's the conclusion I came to. Yes. It became really easy.
Yeah. Then now take that to the hard part of the city, and maintain that same level of equanimity. That is the spiritual challenge. So that it seems daunting. It seems daunting, but
And I want to report back that so far I am back in corporate America, and so folks, never say never, never again, because I declared this on the network many times that I will never go back to the corporate world. And guess what? I'm back in the corporate world, and I am having the time of my life right now.
Yes.
Because it's working. This stuff is working, and people are paying attention, and they're going, "Wow, really?"
Yeah.
I mean, you can really build something based on trust and based on truth.
In the corporate world,
Yes.
yeah. Well, we have to use the old structures to create the new structures. As they crumble, they still are there, and we still need to use those structures. So even though the corporation that you're in, or I actually have my own little baby corporation, and the rules say you must make money, and that is the only rule you need to follow. If you break that rule, you go out of business. And as we learn to create rules that say a corporation must also be responsible to those, it actually emerged about 2 centuries ago. The corporate structure emerged to serve a larger good, to create those things. Like the Erie Canal was built by a corporation because not one company, not one entity could do that. But it was very limited in its power, and that has eroded over time, and it's become this monster. And so we need to regain some of those agreements, those social agreements, saying that this corporation is, yes, to make money, but also to serve. And if it's not doing both, then we've got a problem that we need to talk to.
It's very, what I say is very similar to what you just said. But what I said is, before I even accepted this position, is that if you cannot tell me, or we cannot together come up with a bigger reason to be here than just to make money, then I'm going out the door right now.
Yeah.
So there has to be, I think this new conscious corporate culture has to be, we better find a bigger reason, which is no different than my personal journey. I had to find a bigger reason than myself to do what I do. And if we can't accomplish that in the corporate world, then there's no reason to be in it. I guess there is, but if you're just going to do it for money, look at where that got us.
Exactly. That's the story of modern mind, really. Just make money. That's what your job is.
Yeah, look at how well that worked.
How empty that is. Yeah. So, There's actually a little piece of the book that's calling to me that it would be fun to read about freestanding. Shall I go ahead and do that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then right after you're done with that, why don't you just also tell our viewers, you know, how to engage with you. You know, you want to talk about your website or any other way you want people to contact you.
Okay. So this is towards the end of the dialogues where the Seeker and the Sage have explored so many things, you know, how reverent technology, the sense of the web of life as an ally, personal story, so many other things, and how we hold ourselves on planet Earth. And toward the end of the book, at the end of the dialogues, they're at the beach, and they've done a couple of tasks to reconnect with the cosmos, a couple of small exercises. And at this point, you know, they're kind of at the end of the exercise, and they're just looking out at this beautiful sky, and the Seeker asks, are we really going to make it? Are we really going to awaken to the physicality of our nature as well as our spirituality of our nature? And what are we really? Is this really going to come together? And will we make it? And the Sage says, I think we will. As I sit here in this temple and look out at the decorated sky, listening to the chorus of waves and shorebirds, I remember. I remember that the infinite has been driving itself to greater order and beautiful complexity, to greater consciousness for billions of years. I remember I am bathing in this cosmic stream that carries me on this delightful journey. I remember that we are much larger than we think. We are not meaningless specks on an insignificant planet in a vast, heartless universe. We are instead dazzling flashes of brilliance on a tiny but delightful sacred sparkle of stardust called Earth. The infinite could not be 1 millimeter smaller and still be able to call us into being. The universe worked patiently for billions upon billions of years to create us. There is a place for you in the universe, a place for you in the web of life. You never were separate from the infinite. She fell silent once again, and they sat basking in the starlight. So that just gives you a flavor for a little bit of how the dialogue goes back and forth. Mm. And one thing that's always fun to talk with, I know we're coming close on time, is that often when I talk with people, when I'm interviewed or I go out and talk about the book, I will hide the fact that the Sage is a woman. And it comes as a shock to many people. There's this visceral response that, oh, the Sage is, I never thought that is possible. But that's a whole other conversation, and a vital conversation that's part of our growth, really, of one of our great assumptions. So
I really don't even make a difference between male and female anymore. To me, they are just energy and, you know, human beings.
Well, they are different energy, and every human has aspects of both. And yet, it is a reality in the world that the feminine has been put down, and women and suffer violence and inequity at far greater rates than men. And that, I think, is also part of our work too. So. At any rate, thank you for letting me read that little piece.
Yeah, it was beautiful, actually. It was very beautiful and very elegant, and just looking for what other energy I felt. I just felt it was very soothing, I guess.
You know, I find it amazing that this book came through me. I mean, I used to be an airline pilot, and, you know, we don't write things like this, so I don't take full credit for this book. I mean, Spirit definitely had an enormous hand in it. So it was a gift given to me that I now give to the world. So thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I don't take credit for this network either, because a lot of times things come through my mouth that I know I didn't say them.
Exactly. Yes, right. There were times I put down the pencil and I'd look around the room.
Where did that come from?
Where did this? All right, where are we? So.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, why don't you share with us your website or anything else that you want to share? If you're doing any courses or any special engagements, let us know about that as well.
The website is simple. It's www.theholyuniverse, HOLY, theholyuniverse.com. And the things that I'm doing now is the things that doing now include I do a book club that meets every 6 weeks or so. And the next one, it hasn't been announced yet, but it'll be on the 12th of November. I also want to create seminars and webinars for people who say, okay, how does one engage spiritually with the world? What is my task? What is my calling? Or, you know, the sage actually talks a bit about finding your work in the world that really sings to your passion and intersects with that which is which the world really needs. And I'll be in Boulder, Colorado, actually, for the Front Range Pioneers Conference, and that's happening on from Friday the 7th through Sunday the 9th of November on the CU campus there in Boulder.
Well, you'll be in my backyard.
I realized that as you were speaking. It's like, oh, that's right, I'm going to be right there.
Well, you could actually come in and do a cable TV show with us if you can find the time.
I have a feeling that will happen. I would love to do that. So
we are actually live on Saturdays between 3 and 4 o'clock.
Okay.
Here in Denver.
Well, let's see. We'll talk about it as a possibility. I'm also appearing at the Agape Church in Los Angeles, and that's in March 17th, I believe. No, I'm sorry, March 13th, Friday the 13th of March. And I'll be doing some events down there around the Agape Church. That's Michael Beckwith's organization down in, I believe it's Culver City. So, and I'm constantly interviewing and also doing other speaking engagements that are in the works. I'm trying to take the winter off, but the universe is conspiring otherwise. So we'll see how well that works. But
yeah, fantastic. Well, David, I really enjoyed you being on the show on the Mind, Body, and Soul TV, and it was very, very easy to relate to you and speak with you and having this dialogue. I want to acknowledge you for writing this book and being who you are and what you do in the world. I'm sure that you're touching people on a daily basis, and welcome to having an effect on humanity, and that's fantastic. So thank you very much for being who you are, and anybody that's been listening live or going to be listening the replay, if anything that David said that touched, moved, and inspired you, please go to his website, thewholeuniverse.com, and if you like what you heard here today, we do it often, almost every day, and we are now on a network time at 7 o'clock every day in Mountain Time, and that's 9 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. Pacific. So keep coming back. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow evening, same time, same place. Thank you very much, David.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.